The trial of Maxwell Anderson is in recess for the weekend, but there's a lot to cover from week one.
And joining us to dive into that is legal expert, criminal defense attorney Jonathan LaVoy of Kim and LaVoy. Jonathan, thanks for being here with us.
Sure.
I want to start quickly away from court. With the Waukesha police are investigating this threat against defense attorney Anthony Cotton. You're a defense attorney. That threat likely coming because he's representing Maxwell Anderson. How do you balance the critical work that has to be done, no matter what side you're on, with a threat like this?
It's so difficult. We deal with such sensitive subject matter and so many emotions that threats are just part of the job, but it doesn't make it appropriate. This kind of stuff should never happen. The people that work in the court system are doing the best that they can to make sure things are happening fairly and properly. And when these threats come up, it's scary. And particularly when families are being threatened, it's just an awful situation. I hope the Waukesha police take that seriously, and I hope they get to the bottom of that.
I think they will. Now let's get into what seemed to be the focus of day 4 in the trial, connecting Maxwell Anderson to Sade Robinson's burned out car. We heard from several detectives who talked about how they recovered video from a store, a bus, from a police camera. Talk about that and how compelling was that?
So up until today, we've seen cars driving around, bodies that we can't really identify, but today was significant because we had a video shot of Mr. Anderson getting on that bus, and it was very clearly his face. He was identified by police, and that's the same person that left the burning car. So they were able to identify Mr. Anderson as the person that was walking away from that burning car and getting on that bus. And that was a compelling piece of evidence against him today.
That tan backpack, the dark hoodie, over and over. It's like, you see that? Tan backpack, the black hoodie.
That's why they kept going through that. They wanted to be able to show that's the same person that got on that bus.
They have that piece, but they don't have this forensic connection, nothing that connects him to where the murder or where the mutilation of the corpse happened. How big of an issue is that for the state?
It's an issue, but I don't think it's something that's that difficult to overcome. I think the state's theory here is that the car is likely a very integral part of the crime scene, either in transporting the body or maybe even something happened to her in the car. The reason why is because the car was torched by Mr. Anderson. And the reason you burn up a car is to destroy evidence. So I'm anticipating that they're going to say we don't have evidence because he destroyed it.
Okay, the defense did follow up with questions of one of the detectives, and he's like, did you clearly see that person's hands? Did you see any blood on the hands? Did you see any blood on the shoes? So it seems like they're trying to create that doubt that maybe that's not Anderson.
He's doing the best he can.
Yeah.
But the reality is that Mr. Anderson was the person that walked away from that car. And whether he had visible blood on the shoes or not, I think it's a way to try to cross-examine the officer, but clearly it was pretty devastating to the defense.
How would you grade the defense's job of poking holes in the state's case? And is there anything that stands out that maybe they should have gone more on, or something that they have done well?
This is a difficult case to defend.
Yeah.
Because it's unlikely that Mr. Anderson's going to testify to be able to present any sort of other side of the story. You're left with trying to critique what the police did. And I said yesterday that I really think the defense needs to put into evidence some alternative theory that something else may have happened, but the state seems to be shrinking the timeline and putting Mr. Anderson in this story all the way through from start to finish. So it's going to be a difficult road ahead for Mr. Cotton.
One of the last witnesses of the day was the woman who found Robinson's torso. She was on the stand for less than 30 seconds and no questions from the defense. How impactful was that?
I watched that. It was incredibly impactful to the point where the judge decided to break for the day. And that's the last image that was left with this jury for the entire weekend. And that really hit home. No one has probably ever seen something like that or should ever see something like that. And that was the last image that they were left with. So it's real, and I think it's something that they're going to be thinking about all weekend. And it was a powerful way, quite frankly, for the state to finish their week off on week 1.
To that end, is there a line as a defense attorney you have to walk in deciding which witnesses to focus on cross-examination with, or can you pass? Like evaluating whether that cross-examination is really going to lead to reasonable doubt.
Absolutely. Whenever I'm cross-examining a witness, you want to focus on the ones that matter.
Yeah.
If you're not disagreeing with what they're saying, you let them go. But there are certain police officers who may have missed something or could have done something extra, and you go after the individuals who you feel might show some reasonable doubt.
Week 2, as you said, it just ramps up we expect more evidence, more videos, and the family has been both families have been in the courtroom at some point in time. As an attorney, how do you help them through this process?
Yeah, I was in the courtroom and I saw the family have to watch some of these or look at some of these pictures. It's just an awful situation.
Both sides.
Just both sides.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult situation. But I think when we're talking about what's going to happen in week 2, in the opening, we heard something about a picture that was taken of Ms. Robinson in Mr. Anderson's home. I think that's going to be evidence that the state's probably withholding until the end of their case. We also heard that potentially there's a witness that's going to say that he's familiar with Warnemont Park. So the state still has some additional key pieces of evidence I anticipate they're going to show in next week's as the trial continues.
And then just quick, that's really the focus, right? They have to explain why he was there. You kind of have the photos, but now people may help place him there.
Exactly, and again, it puts her in his apartment, and it sounds like these photos might show some type of an assault taking place. It was referenced in the opening, but we'll see what these photos show. But I think they're going to be interesting and compelling evidence in this trial.
The first week of the Maxwell Anderson trial is now over, and there are a lot of questions about everything that we saw and what we could see next week.
Got Attorney Jonathan LaVoy from Kim & LaVoy here to talk about what we have seen. Jonathan, thanks for being here. We reported today Waukesha police investigating this threat against the defense attorney Anthony Cotton. How does that affect this case, his preparation, and as a defense attorney, how do you compartmentalize that?
Yeah, I feel bad for him. He's going through a really difficult trial, and then to have a threat against yourself and your family is just awful. People work in the court system don't need that, and I feel bad that he had to go through that, and I hope they get to the bottom of what happened and who did this.
Let's turn to the trial now. There's been a lack of forensic evidence pinpointing the location of the murder and the dismembering of her corpse, especially going over the bus video. What does this mean for the prosecution?
So the bus video today was crucial. It put Maxwell Anderson at the scene of the burning car. And we saw from the video of the individual walking away from the car matched exactly the outfit and the backpack of Mr. Anderson getting on the bus. So the state, was able to connect a very important piece of the puzzle here by putting him at the scene where the car was burned.
And takes him all the way home.
All the way home, yeah. We saw him get off the bus and go to home. So they're really kind of mapping out the timeline from start to finish, and they're kind of closing the gaps, saying if he didn't do this, who else could have done this?
We've heard the Attorney Cotton say, I don't want to comment on that when they're trying to identify him in court. What did you make of that comment?
That was a strange circumstance. The detective identified Mr. Maxwell as the individual on the bus, and then the judge turned to Mr. Cotton and said, do you have a position? And he said, no comment. But that spoke for itself. And unfortunately,
yeah.
I think the jury knew, as everyone did, that was in fact Mr. Anderson.
The defense has been trying to poke holes in the state's case, especially maybe at some of the investigative work that was done missing Robinson's blanket.
Right, and that was something that came out today, that despite all of the officers canvassing the park and the area, that they missed this blanket. What else did they miss? What other key pieces of evidence could they have obtained if they did a more thorough search? And that's part of the defense theory here, is that the police may have missed something and may not have done the things that they should have done to get to the bottom of what really happened here.
So everyone's on break. I'm curious, in your opinion, how are the attorneys spending this weekend? And if you're a prosecutor, what are you setting up next week?
Yeah, so it's been a long week for everyone involved in this trial, so I'm sure they're just going to take some much needed time off, but then start ramping up for next week. The state has some other pieces of key evidence that they need to get into next week, which I think we're going to talk about what they found in Mr. Anderson's apartment, what they found on his phone. I think those are two important key pieces of evidence the state is going to start looking at next week. And then the defense is a turn, and who knows what the defense is going to present as evidence here. I suspect Mr. Anderson will not testify, but they certainly could produce other witnesses that might, again, poke holes in what the police did or maybe provide an alternative explanation here.
All right, because I have to ask you this. There was testimony that there was someone else in the house. So might that person be a defense witness?
Absolutely. In fact, Mr. Cotton referenced that there was a neighbor that was just below that's very hard, very easy sleeper, and that he likely would have heard if there was a struggle within the home. So I'm expecting the defense will call him, and I'm expecting the defense will say, if there was something that occurred in that apartment, the downstairs neighbor would have heard it.
All right. Jonathan LaVoy here from Kim LaVoy. Appreciate you breaking things down for us.
Sure.
If you want to get caught up on everything that happened in court during week 1 of the trial, download the latest episode of the Fox 6 podcast, Open Record. Fox 6 investigators Brian Polson and Amanda St. Hilaire walk you through jury selection, opening statements, and witness testimony. Legal expert and criminal defense attorney Julius Kim also offers insight into what we might expect in week 2 of the trial. Open Record is available on Fox Local, wherever you find your favorite podcasts, and right here on Fox 6, Sunday nights at 11.